Marla Whitaker had led hundreds of hikes into the woods, survival weekends, eco-retreats, even wilderness therapy groups. But this group was different. It was supposed to be a solo trip. But 2 days before she set off to map an old fire road through the northern pines, her old ranger buddy called in a favor. 5 private clients. Money up front. No press. A quick weekend trek and back. "You'll like 'em," he said. "Quiet types." He lied. They met her at the base of Old Mason Ridge. Middle-aged couple. Some podcaster from Seattle. A twitchy college kid named Simon who kept a GoPro strapped to his chest. And a woman who said nothing at all and just stared at Marla like they'd met before. They hadn't. By the second day, the compass was off. Not broken, just wrong. The sun set in the wrong direction. The trail markers were mismatched. Her map, GPS, and instincts all argued with each other. The forest grew unfamiliar. Not new growth, not weather damage. Different. Like it had moved in overnight. They found the sign around midday. An old wooden plank nailed to a tree. North Hollow, 1 mile. Population never the same. Marla stopped cold. "This isn't on the map," she muttered. Simon filmed it. The couple laughed. "Cute tourist trap," the husband said. But Marla's stomach turned. The lettering was carved, not painted. Deep and old and wet, though it hadn't rained in days. Half an hour later, they saw the church spire rising above the trees. Beyond it, rooftops. A town. Not ruins, not cabins. A whole town. The streets were empty. Windows shut. Cars parked like everyone had just stepped inside for lunch. No sounds. No wind. No birds. Marla called out. "Nothing." "We're turning back," she said. But when they turned, the trail behind them was gone. Trees stood where the path had been. The woods had shifted, or the town had moved. Simon's GoPro beeped. Location unknown. That night, they set up camp near the edge of the town square. Marla built a fire. The air was too still. The silent woman, who had barely spoken, finally looked up and whispered, "It's not really empty." Marla stared at her. "What do you mean?" The woman pointed toward the church. "They only come out after dark." The fire popped once, loudly, and Simon nearly dropped his camera. The others had grown restless, crowding around the flickering flame, casting glances at the shadow that clung too tightly to the surrounding buildings. There were no insects, no chirping frogs, not even the wind rustling through leaves. It was quiet in a way that made the bones ache. "It's a ghost town," said the podcaster, laughing nervously. "Just abandoned. There are hundreds of these in the Midwest. People move on. Infrastructure fails. End of story." But Marla didn't buy it. The buildings weren't decayed. The vehicles weren't rusted. The town didn't feel abandoned. It felt paused. As dusk melted into full night, the first light flickered on. A porch lamp, 3 houses down. Soft yellow glow. Marla stood. "Who did that?" No answer. Then another light across the street. A kitchen this time. Then the diner sign buzzed to life, buzzing with faint neon and faded red. "Open." The silent woman stood again, her face pale, blank. "They're waking up." "Who?" Marla asked. "Who lives here?" "They don't live. They remember." Simon pointed his GoPro at the window across from the diner. "There's someone in there, look. The curtain moved." Marla grabbed the camera. He was right. A hand, long and white, slipped behind the curtain. Too long, too smooth. "Get your stuff," she said. "We're not staying here." But the trail was gone. The trees had grown closer. The road in was now a narrow footpath overgrown with thorns. "We hike out before dawn." Straight line. No trail. The couple protested. The podcaster suggested waiting until morning. And what if morning never comes? Marla asked flatly. They had no answer. The silent woman whispered again. They don't come for us. Not at first. They wait. Wait for what? For someone to open a door. That night, they stayed by the fire. Marla refused to sleep. She kept her hunting knife on her lap and the flashlight under her thigh. Simon nodded off. The couple curled together. The podcaster snored against his pack. And the town woke up. Soft footsteps on a gravel. A screen door creaking. A radio playing big band jazz from somewhere inside the general store. Flickers of movement behind windows. Faces too still. Smiles too wide. Around 3 a.m., Marla heard a voice. It came from the church. You've come back. She stood, scanning the square. No one else stirred. Who's there? The bell tower chimed once, loud and low. No one pulled the rope. She turned to the silent woman, now wide awake, staring into the dark. You heard that too? The woman nodded. North Hollow remembers. It remembers everyone who's ever walked through, even the ones who didn't mean to. And from the shadows beneath the porch, a pale man in a 1940s suit stepped out, smiling too hard. His voice was like static. We've been waiting for you, Marla. Joseph Finch had been mayor of North Hollow for 117 years. At least that's what the ledger said. Time didn't pass in the hollow the way it did elsewhere. It bent. It curled inward like tree bark wrapping around itself. They'd called him Mayor Finch since he was 32. And he still looked 32. Give or take the paleness and the brittle nails. But something had changed. The lights had turned on without anyone flipping the switches. The clocks ticked again. And the fire bell, the one that hadn't rung since 1963, had sounded once in the night. Visitors, he muttered, his voice dry as old paper. Real ones this time. He moved through the empty town square, cane clicking on the cobbles. The others were waking up, too. Mrs. Grafton lit her stove in the bakery, though she hadn't cooked anything but ash in decades. The Wallace twins were playing their silent game of jacks near the pharmacy. The preacher was already on the church steps, humming hymns with no words. They didn't need to speak to one another. They all felt it. Blood had entered North Hollow again. Living breath. Memory. And with it came possibility. Change. Escape. Mayor Finch unlocked the records office and pulled out the old black book, the town ledger. Dust bloomed as he opened it. There were the usual names. The ones who stayed too long. Rebecca Thorne. James Mallory. Danny Cale. He turned the page, then stopped. Marla Whitaker. Not written in ink, but scratched in. Carved, like it had been there all along. Like the town knew her before she ever arrived. He stepped to the mirror behind the clerk's desk. For the first time in ever, he could see his reflection. He blinked, touched his face. It's begun, he whispered. Later, he found himself walking toward the edge of town, to the circle of firelight where the newcomers were camped. He didn't approach, just stood in the shadow of a rusted pickup. He saw Marla, just like the name in the ledger. Tall, rugged. The kind of person who wouldn't give in easily. Good. They needed that kind of soul to break the loop. The others would try to keep her, or worse, become her. But Finch remembered things the others chose to forget. We weren't always like this, he said aloud, to no one. We didn't choose to be cursed. We chose to survive. The wind changed, a sharp whisper through the dead cornfields. He smelled cedar and snow and smoke, The last smell came from the diner where the stove had just kicked on by itself. He saw the silent woman staring out into the dark, and he recognized her. "She's one of us," he muttered, "but she's trying to leave." He gripped his cane tighter. That wouldn't be allowed. Not by the town. Not by the hollow. Not this time. The sun never really rose in North Hollow. At 7 a.m., there was a pale light, enough to see shapes and outlines, but no warmth. The sky was stuck in that just before dawn shade of gray, like the town couldn't decide whether to wake up or go back to sleep. The group packed quickly. Marla scanned the square with sharp eyes. The lights in the homes were still on. The curtains were drawn again. The door to the church was closed now, bolted from the inside. "We hike," she said. "Due west. Even if the terrain changes, we don't stop." "What about the town?" the podcaster asked, slinging his audio gear over one shoulder. "We could record." "We're not here to investigate. We're here to leave. But the footage is worthless if we're dead." The silent woman lingered behind, staring at the sidewalk. "It's moving," she said. Marla crouched. The concrete had hairline fractures in it, like veins, and those veins were spreading. They cut through the square, pushing past the bakery and the general store. Marla's compass spun uselessly, so she tracked the position of the morning sky instead. Every few minutes, she left a colored ribbon tied to trees and signs, but when they passed a familiar corner again, the ribbon had vanished. Simon finally said what they were all thinking. "We're going in circles." "Impossible," Marla muttered. "I've been navigating these woods for over a decade." "Then why did we just pass the same gas station twice?" They had. The name on the sign hadn't changed. Hollow Fuel and Feed. Except this time, there was a cracked mirror propped against the pump. And someone, a woman, stood in front of it, brushing her hair. She didn't look at them, not even when they passed within 10 feet. By midday, their path had twisted 3 times. The ground beneath them had become soft, muddy, unnatural. And then Marla found the map, tacked to the side of a leaning post office, hand-drawn, ink on parchment, not weathered, fresh. The roads were marked in red, all of them bent in loops. The town was at the center, and surrounding it, a ring of names, her group's names. "What is this?" the husband asked, his voice shaking. Marla turned the map over. There were new names being written, in real time, scratched in by no visible hand. And at the bottom, "Welcome back, Marla. Your room is ready." Marla tore the map down, crumpling it. "We need to break the pattern," she said. "We're not following the roads anymore. We go straight through the woods. No more paths. No more signs." The silent woman finally spoke again. "You can't leave without giving something back." "What are you talking about?" "You don't get out of North Hollow for free." Behind them, a bell rang again. 3 chimes, then 4. The church doors creaked open. Out walked a boy, maybe 12 years old, holding something in his hands. It was Marla's old park ranger badge, scratched, bent. She hadn't seen it in years. "You left something behind last time," he said. "What do you mean last time?" she asked. But the boy had already turned and vanished into the fog. Her name, once, was Isabel Lane. She used to talk too much. Before the hollow, before her voice stopped meaning anything. She had arrived during the last return, 7 years ago. A through hiker on the Appalachian leg, 2 weeks off grid, chasing peace after a bad divorce and an uglier truth. North Hollow wasn't on her map either. She'd just been trying to find a spring when the fog rolled in. Then she'd heard music. Swing era. Soft, distant, warm. The sound of a party from long ago. The kind that made you think people were still dancing somewhere. And there it was. The church spire, the little sign. Population, never the same. At first, it had felt like a dream. Quaint buildings, shiny windows, pie cooling on windowsills. Then she tried to leave. The town didn't stop her, not outright. It just rerouted her. Turned roads into hedgerows, made one path into three. She walked in a loop until her own footprints frightened her. The townsfolk spoke kindly at first, asked her name, offered her lemonade. But every time she gave them a real answer, something of herself, they grew stronger. Not visibly, not obviously. But the town brightened. Their voices grew louder, their smiles wider, and she felt less herself, less real. So she stopped speaking. No words, no power. She stayed that way for 7 years, a ghost among ghosts, a memory held in limbo. But then they came. The new group, and among them, Marla. Isabel remembered Marla. Not the face, maybe, but the presence, the way the town reacted. She's been here before, Isabel whispered to herself that first night. Or part of her has. Marla was a threat. Or a key. Maybe both. Isabel had spent years unraveling the rules. North Hollow wasn't a place, not really. It was a trap made of memory. And the only way out was imbalance, distortion, unanswered questions. If you gave the town a name, a story, a clean ending, it kept you. But if you held your silence, if you kept something unknown, the town faltered. She had seen it flicker. Seen roads collapse, seen doors change shape. Now, with Marla here, the map had started rewriting itself. The town was reacting fast. They won't let you go, Isabel thought, unless someone else stays. That was the rule. One leaves, one remains. That night, as the others argued over the path and the vanishing trail, Isabel crept away to the edge of the square. She saw Mayor Finch watching them from the shadows. He nodded at her, once, in recognition, and Isabel understood. This was the last return. For the Hollow, for her, for all of them. She could give them a way out, but it would cost something, or someone. They walked for hours. The roads grew narrower, more warped, bending at impossible angles. Trees creaked in slow motion. The mist never lifted, only thickened like it was breathing. Marla led them with jaw clenched and knife in hand. She kept seeing things that didn't belong. A ranger outpost sign, one she hadn't seen in 10 years. A stuffed animal from her childhood, soaked and rotting in a puddle. A photo nailed to a telephone pole of her, younger, smiling and standing in a town square that looked just like this one. She didn't remember it being taken, but the look in her eyes felt familiar, haunted, distant. They turned a corner and came upon the church again. No, Marla said flatly, but there it was. Same steps, same open door. The town was folding in on itself. The others were unraveling. Simon was muttering to himself, switching between recording modes like he was trying to find the right frequency. The podcaster had gone quiet, staring too long at the same wall. The couple had stopped speaking to each other. And Isabel, the silent woman, watched Marla with a strange softness in her eyes. "You've been here before," Isabel said softly. Her voice was barely audible. "No, I haven't," Marla snapped. "You didn't come in body, but you remembered this place." Isabel stepped closer. "This town feeds on memory, on repetition. You buried something here, a choice." Marla shook her head, but she was trembling.
The map. The boy with her ranger badge. The etched name. She remembered now. 12 years ago. As a young ranger, she'd led a search and rescue team through this region after a pair of hikers went missing. The fog rolled in. The radio went dead. They found an empty town, one not listed on the forest registry. The others said it wasn't real, just a dream from exhaustion. But Marla had stayed behind for a moment. She'd entered a house, sat at a table, heard someone say, "Leave something of yourself and we'll let you go." She had left her badge and never spoken of it again. Now, North Hollow wanted more. "You can't take back what you gave," Isabel said. "Then what the hell am I supposed to do?" Marla hissed. Isabel looked toward the church. Balance the trade or break the rules. The bell tower chimed once, then twice, then silence. Marla stepped toward the church. Inside, the pews were filled, but the figures sitting in them were still. Porcelain smooth skin, eyes like mirrors, some smiling, some sobbing. At the front, Mayor Finch stood waiting. "It's time, Marla," he said. "The Hollow's waking fully now. Choose how it ends." Behind her, the others stood silently, and Isabel whispered, "I'll stay. Let me be the one." Marla shook her head. "No. I've already been half here for 7 years. I'm the crack in the pattern. Let me widen it." But Marla's eyes landed on something at the altar. Her journal. From that first rescue mission. Pages half torn, soaked in old blood. Inside was one entry. "I think we found a town that doesn't belong. I left something behind, but I don't remember what." She had never filed that report. She had buried it. The town hadn't. "What happens if no one stays?" Marla asked the mayor. He smiled sadly. "Then the Hollow starves. It collapses." "Good."
Marla stood at the altar of the forgotten church, staring down at the journal that should not exist. Not here, not now. Its pages fluttered in a breeze that had no source. Behind her, the others waited, broken, confused, and quiet. Mayor Finch stepped down from the pulpit, cane tapping on the floor with each step. "You brought the Hollow back with your memory. You made it real again," he said. "Now you must choose what becomes of it." Marla looked around the sanctuary. The pews were still filled with watchers, those long trapped echoes of people, hollowed out by time and choice. "What happens if I choose myself?" she asked. Finch smiled. There was sorrow in it, regret. "Then you stay, and the others go. The Hollow continues, for another cycle. And if I choose no one, then the Hollow collapses, but nothing leaves untouched. Your mind, your memories. You may leave, but you'll carry this forever." Isabel stepped forward. "I can break the pattern. I've lived on its edge long enough. Let me." But Marla shook her head. She had been here before, and forgotten it. She had let it fester. If North Hollow had power, she was part of the circuit. She'd fed it. She had left something behind. Maybe that was the trap. Not getting lost, but being remembered. Marla turned to Finch. "What if I remember everything?" He blinked. "Pardon?" "What if I take all of it with me, every story, every name, every lie, and every truth? What if I carry North Hollow out with me, in full memory?" The mayor hesitated. "Then the Hollow dies, but so do the illusions." "Good." She reached for the journal. Its pages lit up, not with fire, but with memory. She saw the first townspeople, the accident that broke time, the ritual that tethered thought to place, the echoes of visitors past, looping lives, trapped souls, worn identities recycled into the fog. She took them all. The church began to shake.
Glass shattered. The bell rang wildly, a scream of brass and madness. Outside, the fog drew back like a curtain. The trees became trees again. The sky turned blue. The road reformed. The others began to run. Simon screamed. The podcaster collapsed in sobs. The couple held each other, sprinting for the newly visible highway sign blinking on the horizon. Isabel lingered. "Are you sure?" she asked. Marla nodded. "Someone has to remember. That's the only way it ends. You'll lose yourself. I'd rather lose me than lose anyone else again." Marla stepped through the church doors. The moment she crossed the threshold, the town behind her began to wither. The buildings cracked. The neon blinked out. The people in the pews crumbled into ash and dust. Mayor Finch removed his hat, bowed once, and vanished. Marla collapsed on the forest floor. No fog, no map, just trees and dirt. She could hear birds, real ones. She got up. The others were on the road waving down a logging truck. She didn't join them right away. Instead, she pulled a pen from her pocket and a notepad from her bag. North Hollow, a place that doesn't exist, but used to. A trap built from memory. A loop made from stories. And I was part of it. I still am. She wrote it all down, every detail, so the Hollow couldn't hide again. The next day, she mailed the notes to herself, and then burned the copy. Only one version would survive. She would carry the rest in her dreams.
If you're ever hiking the northern pines and find yourself in fog, if the road ahead doesn't match the map, if a town appears where none should be, don't leave anything behind. Not your name, not your story, not even a breath.